Wanted to take a look at Salesforce stock today. CRM is a ticker symbol. Salesforce just released their financial earnings just a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to kind of break down what I saw in there. First, overall optimistic. Their AI product outlays are looking pretty good. Expectations are they're going to see continued increases with their AI products. Awesome. However, they do have a couple other legacy products that are having trouble in certain regions throughout the world. I did go through the notes on the transcripts from the conference call. Overall, optimistic. Looking forward, looking at the current price to earnings ratio. This is a growth stock. We're still seeing a lot of high growth with Salesforce stock. Unfortunately, CRM stock is a bit overpriced. Then we bring in the economy. And although AI stocks have had their cage rattled on Monday, of course, with Nvidia selling off, a lot of these services you're going to see still have a lot of opportunities. So they're kind of separate in some ways. And a lot of these companies are probably looking to realize that they're not going to have to spend as much, which again is a positive. But the economy itself is likely to be restricted somewhat. We're seeing strong job growth rate. Awesome, except it's not. That's when good news is bad news kind of thing. And this will affect a lot of companies across the board because interest rates are going to remain higher for longer. So the sales growth, the growth number in revenue for Salesforce that I've been looking at, and companies across the board, even companies with stocks that I own, I don't see it hit, period. I see slower growth, but still positive growth, so that the Federal Reserve can get inflation down to where they want it. We do have a couple X factor potentials with Washington, D.C. I believe this year is going to be a very kinetic year, and I think the bull market has run its course. CRM stock will go lower. Salesforce stock is probably one of those things that's run its course. It's been up and down as they work through some problems. Let's jump in and I'll do a full Salesforce stock financial projection, taking a look at CRM stock and where I think it should be. Real quick and dirty, I wouldn't pay $250 for it. Let's jump in. Here's a look at Salesforce stock. CRM is the ticker symbol there for Salesforce stock. For those of you who's just joining me, I'm an economist first and foremost. I look at the economy and ask the question, what's going to happen with the economy next? Then I look at individual stocks within the economy. I also look at sectors as well. So that's how I break things down. And this economy, it's growing too rapidly still. Federal Reserve lowered interest rates through 2024. And if you watched any of my content all through 2023, the tail end of 2023, I put out my projections and I said, stock market's just going to keep going through 2024. But I did expect that what the Federal Reserve was doing would take effect and that more likely than not, we would see selling in the stock market October, November, December. The Federal Reserve lowered interest rates, and that was not part of my planning. I said vehemently that they should not be lowering interest rates if the economy was too strong. They did. They wanted to kind of keep things going. Well, now we're about to pay the price for that because we're seeing economic growth data points such as payrolls. They're coming in hot, which means we will see price pressures, which means the Federal Reserve cannot move. And because of that, broadly speaking, the stock market, a 2-year bull market, it's done. Plain and simple. The Federal Reserve missed it again. They thought they were ahead of it, just met this morning, and they're sitting there saying, you know what? I don't know how confident we are we're going to hit that 2% target rate. I'm confident that they should not have lowered interest rates, and I said so all through 2024. So now this is where we are at this point. And from here, I think the bull market that we've seen over the past solid 2 years, but if you go all the way back to 2020, the March lockdowns when the stock market just bottomed. Since then, we've basically been on a 5-year run with a bull market, a little bit of a pause as the Federal Reserve pushed interest rates. Well, now the Federal Reserve and that 2022-2023 period of time, a lot of sideways to downward movement, but it really wasn't that big of a sell-off, no kind of real correction, and then the stock market just kind of kept going. Now the Federal Reserve is going to have to step back in. We'll very likely see all these stocks, including Salesforce stock, move lower. So the growth rates, if the Federal Reserve does cinch up the economy itself, I don't know how these companies hit their revenue goals. Plain and simple. Growth rates and jobs are too strong. Because of that, we need to see basically zero growth rate in jobs. We just printed 256 last month. This month coming, we're only a couple days away for non-farm payrolls to hit. That's going to be rich too. And on that day, the stock market will fall. And we're going to continue to see numbers like that. And so the incentive to push this stock market and Salesforce Stock CRM higher, that incentive is taken away. We don't know what's going to happen out of Washington, D.C. Taking a bigger look, this is XLK stock or XLK ETF, which is the tech sector ETF. iShares, I think, is who pushes this one out. The tech sector, broadly speaking, outperformed Salesforce stock CRM by about 50% since, and I put this kind of right at 2020, the very tail end of 2019 going into the early part of 2020, because that was the big economic sort of pause or shift, if you will. Our economy today is really generated since then. You can see through 2022 to 2023, we saw some downward movement. Then from 23 to where we are now, a solid bull market move. But really, this whole economy started in 2020. So technology stocks, broadly speaking, outperformed Salesforce stock by about 50%. That's a pretty decent chunk. And I don't see any real sort of upside move from here with Salesforce. Again, I see the broad stock market moving lower. Let's break down Salesforce financial data. 9.4 on Q3, and I do have projections coming. Gross margins at 69.8%, not quite where they were just the quarter before, the previous 2 quarters, but still above previous quarters from there. Operating margins, 20.6. These continue to move higher. These are numbers that I like to see on a regular basis. Net margins, 16.2. They're fairly consistent, and that's something that you really want to kind of look for when it comes to a growth company like this, where you're seeing accelerated growth outside of the norm, the bell curve. You want to be able to ask a reasonable question. Given the past, what can we reasonably assume if the patterns remain the same, if the company can continue to perform? They're sitting there looking at their numbers and say, okay, this was this year. Next year we got to do a little better. We can reasonably assume Salesforce will put together net margins around 15 to 17.5%. Nice. Earnings per share, 2024. We're still waiting on Q4. $10.04 for 2024, looking at $11.23 for 2025. The big jump you can see since 2023, that's what really kind of propelled things for Salesforce stock. Price to earnings ratio, far too rich. The broader stock market is half of this. So this is where I seriously look at Salesforce stock and think to myself, this is where the pause really begins, because I don't see the revenue growth being there to start with. So the price to earnings ratio tells you that these guys are too rich to begin with. And if there's a sudden kind of loss in the pace of the revenue growth, Salesforce stock down. CRM would hit the floor. Projected revenue, 2024 should finish up about 38. But going into 2025, 41.4, that's the next 4 quarters. I'm going to be looking at the next 4 quarters, which would still count Q4 going forward. 41.4, nah, they'll miss it. The economy itself is going to, we're just not going to see that kind of growth rate anymore. The stock market will fall down. So you're looking at 11.23 on 2025 for earnings per share growth rate, but I used 10.79. I looked at Q4 2024, Q1, Q2, Q3 for 2023. All right, so the United States 10-year Treasury yield is trading at about 4.65%. This is your benchmark. This is the benchmark investment rate. And you ask yourself the question at the beginning of the year or a 4-quarter period of time, what can I get out of the benchmark? 4.65%. Earnings per share, you're looking at 10.79 with a price. CRM stock was trading at 3.43 when I looked at this earlier. Divide that out, that gives you a 3.138% yield. Now, Salesforce stock is a growth stock. But what if they don't grow? Your risk variable is much higher with Salesforce stock, and they have proven that they have underperformed multiple times. And given the economic environment we're entering, I think Salesforce stock misses, Salesforce the company misses, and therefore Salesforce stock itself falls. I'll ask the question, well, how much would I pay for that $10 in future earnings, if they even get that? $250 at most. They're just not going to get their growth rates. Sure, the AI future is looking good, but some of their legacy stuff is not so good. They're having regional issues with certain countries. So given that, when you break it down, you're better off with the U.S. 10-year Treasury yield. Because here's the thing, a year from now, 4.65% yield is going to look pretty good, because the Federal Reserve will have probably the ability after a year to start lowering things. But at that point, the damage is already done. The growth rates have contracted. So maybe the Treasury yield is printing 3.75, 3.5 for the 10. You're sitting on a Treasury yield with 4.65. The price of that went up. You took your 4.65% earnings, you're selling this instrument for a profit, versus buying CRM stock with a yield of 3.13. If they miss their future earnings and revenue, the yield, it's not going to hit. You're going to take a loss on your CRM stock purchase, and from there, you're sitting on a loss. I'll take the Treasury over Salesforce stock all day long on this one. I don't think that the economy moving forward will keep the bull run moving, and Salesforce stock moves lower. Make sure to hit that like and follow button if you want the written content on a lot of the things I'm putting together, including my personal portfolio and my ETF trading strategies, including the ETF inverse trading strategies. Make sure to click the links to my Substack, where I try to put out about 2 postings per week at this point. We'll see you in the next video.